The sensor alert came at the worst possible time. Admiral Orr was in the middle of his evening meal when the emergency signal screamed through his command ship. He dropped his utensils and ran to the bridge, his heavy boots echoing through the metal corridors. "Report," he demanded as he reached his command chair. His sensor officer turned to face him. The young scales had gone pale with fear. "A single vessel, Admiral. It dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of Imperial territory 7 minutes ago." "One ship? You activated emergency protocols for one ship," or felt his anger rising. "Which species? Traders? Refugees?" The sensor officer swallowed hard. "Human, sir." The bridge went silent. Every officer stopped what they were doing, or felt his blood turn cold in his veins. "That's impossible," he said quietly. "The humans 40 years ago. They haven't been seen since the incident at Nexus Station. The ship's energy signature matches human designs from that era, Admiral. Our systems confirm it with 98% certainty." Or walked slowly to the main display screen. A small dot blinked at the edge of space. One ship, just one ship, and yet his hands were trembling. He remembered the stories from his grandfather. The old warrior had fought in the border conflicts before the humans. He spoke of human ships that moved like predators, of weapons that could crack moons, of soldiers who kept fighting even when victory was impossible. "They don't know how to surrender," his grandfather had said. "That makes them the most dangerous species in the galaxy." "What is the ship doing?" Orr asked. "Nothing, sir. It's moving at standard cruising speed toward the Imperial. No weapons active. No shields raised. It's broadcasting no messages." "It's heading for Prime." "Yes, Admiral. At current speed, it will reach the in 6 standard days." Or turned to his communications officer. "Contact High Command. Tell them what we've found, and send word to the other fleets. I want 60 warships at these coordinates within the hour." The communications officer hesitated. "Sir, if we mobilize 60 ships, the entire quadrant will know something is happening. The other species will ask questions." "Let them ask," Orr said grimly. "The humans have returned. Everyone will know soon enough." Across the galaxy, the news spread like fire through dry grass. Sensor stations picked up the fleet movements. Intelligence officers decoded fragments of military communications. Within hours, every species with access to deep space relays knew what was happening. The humans had come back. On the water world of Prime, the consortium leaders gathered in their floating council chamber. They had grown rich and powerful during the human absence. Their trade network spanned 1,000 systems, but now the eldest among them remembered darker times. "They destroyed the Armada in 11 minutes, one of them said. 300 ships gone. They tried to blockade a human colony world. The humans sent one battle group." "That was decades ago," another replied. "Perhaps they have grown weak in isolation. Or perhaps they have grown stronger. We should prepare for either possibility." On the conquered world of slaves working in the deep mines heard whispers passed from one work crew to another. "The humans have returned." The words moved through tunnels and factories, through prison camps and labor yards. No one knew what it meant. But for the first time in generations, the people felt something they had almost forgotten. Hope. The Galactic Concord held an emergency session. Representatives from 40 species crowded into the Great Assembly Hall. Arguments echoed off the ancient walls. "We must demand the stand down," the ambassador insisted. "If they attack that human ship and the humans retaliate, we could all be caught in the crossfire." "The humans are in Imperial space," the representative countered. "We have every right to defend our borders." "One ship is not an invasion, it's a message." "Then what message are they sending?" No one could answer that question. In orbit around Prime, Emperor IX watched the situation unfold from his private observation deck. He was old now, his scales faded to a dull gray. He had ruled the Empire for 50 years. He had conquered 12 species. He had built the greatest military force the galaxy had ever seen. And he was afraid. Only his closest advisors knew the truth about Nexus Station. The official story was that 7 species had attacked the human delegation on their own initiative, driven by fear of human expansion. The reality was different. The Emperor himself had arranged the attack. He had bribed and threatened the 7 species into action. He had watched the human diplomats die and felt nothing but satisfaction. The humans had been growing too powerful, too influential. Their technology was advancing too quickly. Their alliance with smaller species threatened economic dominance. The attack at Nexus Station was meant to break their spirit, to show them that the galaxy rejected them. Instead, the humans had simply left. They gathered their people from every station and colony world. They recalled their ships. They sealed their borders, and they vanished into silence. For 40 years, the Emperor had told himself he had won. The humans were gone. The galaxy belonged to the Empire. Now, staring at the tactical display showing a single human ship moving steadily toward his, he wondered if he had been wrong. Admiral Orr's fleet assembled quickly. 60 warships formed a barrier across the human vessel's path. They were the finest ships in the Imperial Navy, each one capable of destroying a small moon. Together, they represented enough firepower to level a continent. The human ship continued forward without slowing. "Open a channel," Orr ordered. "Channel open, Admiral." "Human vessel, this is Admiral Orr of the Imperial Navy. You have entered sovereign Imperial space without authorization. You will halt your approach immediately and identify yourself. Failure to comply will be considered an act of war." "Silence." "Human vessel, respond." More silence. Or waited 5 minutes, 10, 15. The human ship kept moving forward, steady and slow, like a swimmer crossing a calm lake. "Sir," his sensor officer said, "I'm detecting something strange about that ship." "What is it?" "Our deep scans can't penetrate the hull. It's like the ship is absorbing our sensor beams. I've never seen anything like it." Or studied the tactical display. The human vessel was smaller than his flagship, roughly the size of a medium cruiser. Its design was angular and plain, without the decorative elements that most species added to their ships. It looked functional, purposeful. "Perhaps their communications are damaged," his second-in-command suggested. "They may not be receiving our messages." Or perhaps they simply don't care to respond. Or made a decision. "Weapons officer, prepare a warning shot. Target the space 300 meters ahead of the human vessel." "Yes, Admiral." The plasma cannon fired. A bolt of superheated energy streaked toward the human ship, bright enough to light up the surrounding space. It never reached its target. The bolt stopped in empty space. It hung there for a moment, suspended by some invisible force. Then it dissolved into nothing, like a drop of water evaporating under a hot sun. The bridge crew stared in shocked silence. "What just happened?" Orr whispered. Before anyone could answer, the human ship finally responded. Not with weapons, not with words. It transmitted a single message, a set of coordinates and a time, 6 days from now. Then it continued forward as if nothing had happened. Orr looked at the coordinates. His blood turned to ice. They marked the exact location of the Emperor's summer palace, visible from orbit. The humans knew exactly where they were going, and they wanted everyone to know what they were going to do when they got there. Across the galaxy, trillions of beings watched and waited. The greatest empire in known space had been challenged by a single ship. No one knew what would happen next. But everyone knew that something had changed. The humans had returned, and the galaxy held its breath. The fleet followed the human ship like wolves trailing a wounded beast, but Admiral Orr was beginning to wonder who was really the predator and who was the prey. 3 days had passed since the human vessel entered Imperial space. 3 days of silence. 3 days of that single ship moving forward at the same steady speed, never slowing, never speeding up, never responding to any communication. Or had tried everything: threats, demands, even a carefully worded offer of safe passage if the humans would simply explain their purpose. The ship ignored it all. The Galactic Concord has issued another statement, his communications officer reported. They're demanding that we allow the human vessel to pass without interference. On what grounds? They say that one ship cannot be considered an invasion force. They're calling it a diplomatic mission. Or laughed bitterly. A diplomatic mission that refuses to communicate, that absorbs our weapons fire without explanation. The Conquered is afraid. They don't want to be caught in the middle if this turns into a war. He walked to the observation window and stared at the human ship in the distance. It was named the Quiet Resolve. His intelligence officers had found that much in old human records. The ship was 47 years old, built just before the withdrawal. By human standards, it was ancient. But something about it felt wrong. "Sir," his sensor officer called out, "I've finished my analysis of the weapon absorption we witnessed." And the young officer hesitated. "I don't know how to explain it, Admiral. The plasma bolt didn't hit a shield. It was stopped by something else. Some kind of field that doesn't match any technology in our databases. The energy wasn't deflected or blocked. It was simply erased." "Erased?" "Yes, sir. Converted into nothing. Our best scientists say that should be impossible. Energy cannot be destroyed, only transformed. But that's exactly what happened." Or felt a chill run down his spine. What kind of technology could erase energy itself? What else could a ship like that do? Far away on Prime, Emperor IX was asking the same questions. He had not slept in days. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw the faces of the human diplomats at Nexus Station. 4,000 of them gathered for what they thought would be a historic moment. They had come to offer gifts, to share technology, to build bridges between species. And he had ordered them killed. The Emperor remembered the intelligence reports from before the attack. The humans had developed a new energy synthesis technology. Clean, efficient, and nearly limitless. They planned to share it freely with any species that wanted it. No cost, no conditions, just a gift to the galaxy. That generosity had terrified him more than any weapon. If the humans gave away such technology, the smaller species would no longer need energy exports. The Empire's economic dominance would crumble. Worlds that feared power would suddenly have options. So he had arranged the attack. 7 species, carefully chosen, each with their own reasons to fear human influence. He had promised them rewards. He had threatened them with consequences. And when the blood was spilled at Nexus Station, he had watched from the safety of his palace and called it a victory. Now a human ship was coming to his doorstep, and he had no idea what it intended to do when it arrived. "Your Majesty," his chief advisor said carefully, "perhaps we should consider evacuation." "Evacuate from my own palace." The coordinates they transmitted are very specific. They know exactly where you will be, if they intend violence. If they intended violence, they would have brought more than one ship. The Emperor shook his head. "No, they want something else. They want me to run. They want me to show fear." "With respect, Your Majesty, you are showing fear. You haven't slept. You haven't eaten. The entire palace can see that something is wrong." The Emperor turned to face his advisor. "Do you know why I attacked Nexus Station?" The advisor blinked in surprise. This was the first time the Emperor had ever admitted his involvement out loud. "The humans were too good," the Emperor continued. "Too generous. Too willing to help others without asking for anything in return. Species like that don't survive in this galaxy. They get used. They get betrayed. I thought I was teaching them a lesson. I thought I was showing them how the universe really works." "And did you?" The Emperor looked out at the stars. "I don't know. Maybe I just made them angry. Maybe they've spent 40 years building weapons we can't imagine. Maybe they've come to teach me a lesson instead." Aboard the Quiet Resolve, Captain sat alone in her quarters. She was 73 years old, though she looked no older than 50. Human medical technology had advanced greatly during the withdrawal, but some wounds couldn't be healed by medicine. On her desk was a photograph. A young woman with dark hair and bright eyes smiling at the camera, her daughter, Maya, 22 years old when she died at Nexus Station. Maya had been so excited about the diplomatic mission. She had spent months helping to develop the energy synthesis presentation. She believed that humanity's greatest strength wasn't their technology or their military. It was their ability to share, to cooperate, to lift others up instead of pushing them down. "We can change the galaxy, Mom," Maya had said before she left. "We just have to show them there's a better way." Had watched the news reports from Nexus Station. She had seen the footage of the attack. She had watched her daughter die along with 4,000 others, murdered by species who feared kindness more than cruelty. The withdrawal had been a collective decision. Humanity had voted to leave, not because they were afraid, not because they had been defeated, but because they needed time to grieve, time to heal, time to decide what kind of species they wanted to be. Some had wanted revenge. In those first terrible years, there were voices calling for humanity to unleash everything they had, to burn the galaxy clean and start over. The technology existed. The anger existed. It would have been so easy. But humanity had chosen differently. "We will not become what they think we are," the chief arbiter had said. "We will not prove them right about us. We will be better." So they had waited. They had watched. They had continued to advance their technology, not for war but for knowledge. And when they finally decided to return to galactic affairs, they chose to send one ship. One ship to deliver a message. One ship to show the galaxy what humanity had become. Looked at her daughter's photograph one more time. "I'm going to tell them the truth," she whispered. "They're going to know what they took from us, what they took from everyone. And then we're going to give them what you wanted to give them all along." The ship's computer chimed softly. They were approaching the coordinates. Stood and straightened her uniform. It was time. Admiral or watched the human ship slow to a stop directly above the Emperor's summer palace. His fleet surrounded it completely, hundreds of weapons locked on target. "Admiral," his communications officer said, "the human ship is charging its communication systems. They're preparing to broadcast." "Just to us?" "No, sir. They're accessing every frequency, every relay, every open channel in the galaxy." Or felt his stomach drop. "They're going to broadcast to everyone." "Yes, sir. Whatever they're about to say, the entire galaxy is going to hear it." The main screen flickered. A woman's face appeared. She was older, with silver hair and calm eyes. She wore a simple uniform with no decorations, no medals, nothing to indicate rank or achievement. "My name is Captain," she said. 40 years ago, my daughter was murdered at Nexus Station, along with 4,000 other human beings. Today, I'm going to tell you the truth about what happened there, and why." Across the galaxy, trillions of beings stopped what they were doing and listened. The truth was finally coming out. Captain's face filled screens across the galaxy. In council chambers and market squares, in military bases and private homes, in the grand halls of emperors and the cramped cells of slaves, beings of every species watched and listened. 40 years ago, humanity sent a diplomatic delegation to Nexus Station. 4,000 of our best and scientists, teachers, engineers, diplomats. They went with open hands and open hearts. They went to offer a gift. She paused, letting her words settle. "We had developed a new form of energy synthesis. Clean, efficient, nearly limitless. a technology that could power entire civilizations without depleting resources or destroying environments, and we decided to give it away. On Prime, the consortium leaders exchanged uncomfortable glances. They remembered the rumors from that time. They had dismissed them as propaganda. We asked for nothing in return, continued. No treaties, no trade agreements, no political concessions. We simply believed that all species should have access to abundant energy. We believed that sharing would bring the galaxy closer together. She let out a small, sad laugh. We were naive, but we weren't wrong. The image on the screen changed. Documents appeared. Communications logs, financial records, each one translated into a dozen languages simultaneously. These records were obtained from sources we will not name. They show the truth about what happened at Nexus Station. The attack was not spontaneous. It was not the result of fear or misunderstanding. It was purchased. Across the galaxy, beings leaned closer to their screens. The Empire paid 7 species to attack our delegation. They provided weapons, coordinates, and diplomatic cover. They promised rewards for cooperation and threatened punishment for refusal. Emperor IX personally approved the operation. On Prime, the Emperor watched from his observation deck. His hands were shaking. His advisors stood frozen around him, afraid to speak, afraid to move. The Emperor feared what our technology would mean for his economic power, said. He feared that if smaller species no longer needed energy exports, they would no longer accept control. So he decided to eliminate the threat. He decided to kill 4,000 innocent people who had come to help. The documents continued to scroll across the screen. Payment records, encrypted messages, strategic plans marked with the Imperial seal. The evidence was overwhelming. My daughter was among those who died, said quietly. Her name was Maya. She was 22 years old. She had spent 6 months helping to prepare the energy synthesis presentation. She believed that this gift would change the galaxy for the better. She was so excited to be part of it. His voice remained steady, but her eyes glistened with tears she refused to let fall. Maya died believing in the goodness of other species. She died hoping that her sacrifice would matter. For 40 years I have carried her memory. For 40 years I have wondered if she was right. The image changed again. Now the screen showed footage from Nexus Station itself, security recordings that had been sealed away for decades. The human delegates arriving, smiling, carrying data tablets with their presentation. The attack beginning without warning, bodies falling, screams echoing through the station corridors. His voice continued over the footage. This is what the galaxy did to our gift. This is what the galaxy did to our hope. 4,000 people who wanted nothing more than to help, murdered for the crime of generosity. On the conquered world the slaves had stopped working. Guards and prisoners alike stared at the screens mounted in the work yards. They had suffered under rule for 3 generations. They knew what the Empire was capable of, but seeing the proof, laid out so clearly, still shocked them. We could have responded with war, said. We had the technology, we had the anger. We could have burned the Empire to ash and scattered its people across the stars. Many of us wanted exactly that. She shook her head slowly. But we chose differently. We grieved, we healed, and we asked ourselves what kind of species we wanted to be. Did we want to prove the Emperor right? Did we want to show the galaxy that humans were dangerous, that our generosity was just a mask for aggression? Or did we want to prove that we were exactly what we claimed to be? The footage ended. His face filled the screen again. We chose to be better, not because we were weak, not because we were afraid, but because we believed that the galaxy deserved to know the truth, and because we still believed in the gift we came to offer. She leaned forward slightly. So here is what we are going to do. We are going to give you everything, the energy synthesis technology, the scientific principles behind it, The engineering specifications needed to build your own systems. Everything my daughter died trying to share with you. Free, unconditional, for every species that wants it. Admiral Orr stared at his screen in disbelief. His weapons officers looked to him for orders. He had none to give. "We don't want your gratitude," continued. "We don't want your apologies. We want you to have what we tried to give you 40 years ago. We want you to build a better future with it. That's all Maya ever wanted. That's all any of us wanted." She paused, and when she spoke again, her voice was harder. "But we also want you to know who tried to stop that future. We want you to know who killed our people and why. We want you to know that Emperor IX built his power on the graves of those who tried to help him. What you do with that knowledge is not our decision. It's yours." A worker picked up a heavy tool from the ground. The guard watching him reached for his weapon. But when they looked at the screen and then back at the guard, something passed between them. The guard lowered his hand. Across the Empire, similar scenes played out. In military barracks and government offices, in the halls of client species and the homes of citizens. The truth was out. Everything that came next would be different. "Humanity is not returning to galactic politics," said. "We have no interest in empire or conquest. We came to deliver a message and a gift. Now we will leave you to decide what to do with both." She looked directly into the camera one last time. "My daughter believed that kindness could change the universe. She was killed for that belief, but she wasn't wrong. The universe can change. It just needs people willing to try." The screen went dark. For a long moment, the galaxy was silent. Then slowly, the silence began to break. The workers began to move, not back to their stations, away from them. The guards didn't try to stop them. On Prime, the consortium leaders were already calculating how the energy synthesis technology would transform their economy. They were also quietly deleting their own records of dealings with the Empire. On every world that had suffered under Imperial rule, beings were looking at each other and asking the same question: what do we do now? And on Prime, Emperor IX watched his empire begin to crumble and realized that he had been defeated by a single ship that had never fired a weapon. The humans had done something far more powerful than destroy his fleet. They had told the truth. The Empire was burning, not with fire but with something far more destructive: the truth. Within hours of Captain's broadcast, riots erupted on 17 worlds. The slaves abandoned their workstations and marched through the streets of every industrial city. The who had been conquered just a decade ago stormed their colonial government buildings. Even some citizens, disgusted by what their emperor had done, began demanding answers. Emperor IX watched it all from his palace and felt his power slipping away like sand through his fingers. 3 client species have declared independence, his chief advisor reported, reading from a data tablet with trembling hands. The rebellion has spread to all 12 occupied worlds. Our garrison commanders are requesting reinforcements, but we don't have enough troops to respond to every uprising simultaneously. What about the fleet? Admiral Orr's ships are still surrounding the human vessel, but we've had to recall the border fleets to deal with internal security. If any external power wanted to attack us right now, we'd be vulnerable. The Emperor slammed his fist against the arm of his throne. "One ship, one single ship, and it's destroying everything I built." "Your Majesty, perhaps if you made a statement, the allegations, claimed the evidence was fabricated." "The evidence came from our own archives. Half the galaxy has probably authenticated it by now." The Emperor stood and walked to the window. The capital city stretched out below him, gleaming towers and crowded streets. He had ruled this empire for 50 years. He had believed it would last forever. Now he realized it had always been built on lies, and lies, eventually, are discovered. "There's only one option left," he said quietly. "Destroy the human ship, remove the source of this infection." His advisor paled. "Your Majesty, if we attack them now after what Captain revealed." "I don't care how it looks. I don't care what the Galactic Conquered thinks. That ship is the symbol of everything that's happening. If we destroy it, we prove that the Empire is still strong. We prove that we can't be brought down by words and old documents. And if the humans retaliate, it's one ship. Whatever technology they have, they can't fight 200 warships alone." The Emperor turned to face his advisor. His eyes were cold, desperate, empty of everything except fear disguised as determination. "Order Admiral or to open fire. Full bombardment. I want that ship reduced to atoms." Admiral or received the order with a heavy heart. He had served the Empire his entire life. He had followed orders without question, believing that obedience was the highest form of honor. But something had changed in him over the past few days. Watching the human ship approach without fear, seeing his weapons absorbed like they were nothing, listening to Captain's broadcast and realizing that everything he had believed about the Nexus Station attack was a lie. But he was still a soldier, and soldiers followed orders. "All ships," he said slowly, "weapons free. Target the human vessel. Fire on my command." 200 warships locked their weapons onto the quiet resolve. Plasma cannons, missile batteries, energy beams capable of cutting through the strongest armor. Together, they represented enough firepower to destroy a small moon. The human ship didn't move. It didn't raise shields. It simply waited. "Admiral," his sensor officer said nervously, "the human vessel is not taking any defensive action." Maybe they can't. Maybe they've accepted their fate. Or maybe they want us to fire. Or hesitated. That thought had occurred to him as well, but he had his orders. Fire. 200 ships opened fire simultaneously. The space around the quiet resolve became a storm of energy. Plasma bolts streaked through the darkness. Missiles spiraled toward their target. Energy beams carved bright lines across the void. The bombardment lasted 11 seconds. When the weapon's fire faded or expected to see debris, fragments of hull plating, expanding clouds of vapor, the scattered remains of a destroyed vessel. Instead, he saw the quiet resolve, still intact, still motionless. Its hull was glowing red-hot from the absorbed energy, but it was undamaged. "Impossible," someone whispered. Then the human ship began to change. The outer hull started to peel away. Layers of armor separated like the petals of a flower opening to the sun. Beneath the old, weathered exterior was something else entirely. A different ship, sleeker, darker. Its lines were sharp and predatory, nothing like the blocky design they had seen before. And it was covered in technology that no scanner could identify. "What is that?" or breathed. His sensor officer was frantically working his console. "I don't know, Admiral. I'm reading power signatures that shouldn't be possible. That ship, it's not 40 years old. The outer hull was a disguise. The real ship underneath is using technology we've never seen before." A transmission came through, Captain's voice calm and almost sad. "That was your one chance to show you've changed. You haven't." The quiet resolve moved. Or had commanded warships for 30 years. He had seen fast vessels, quick attack craft that could outmaneuver larger ships, but he had never seen anything move like the human ship moved. One moment it was surrounded by his fleet. The next moment it was behind his flagship. Then it was below them. Then above. It moved through his formation like a dancer moving through a crowd of statues. And every time it passed a ship, something happened. Weapons systems went dark. Engines sputtered and died. Targeting computers crashed and wouldn't restart. In 4 seconds, the human ship had disabled every weapon on every vessel. Not a single died. The quiet resolve returned to its original position and stopped. Its exposed hull gleamed in the starlight, beautiful and terrifying at the same time. Or stared at his tactical display, Every ship in his fleet was dead in space, 200 warships helpless, and the human vessel hadn't fired a single shot. "Admiral," his communications officer said weakly, "the human ship is transmitting again. Audio only." "Let me hear it." Captain's voice filled the bridge. "We could have killed every person on every ship in your fleet. We chose not to. Remember that when you're writing the history of this day." The transmission ended. Or sat heavily in his command chair. He had spent his whole life believing that the Empire was the greatest power in the galaxy. He had believed that their military was unbeatable. He had believed that the humans because they feared strength. Now he understood the truth. The humans hadn't withdrawn out of fear. They hadn't been hiding. They had been choosing to be merciful when they could have been merciless, choosing to show restraint when they could have shown power. And now they had shown both. On Prime, Emperor IX received the news in silence. His entire fleet disabled in 4 seconds, his military might revealed as worthless, his empire collapsing around him. His chief advisor approached carefully. "Your Majesty, perhaps it's time to consider." "Surrender," the Emperor laughed bitterly. "Surrender to what? They haven't demanded anything. They haven't asked for territory or tribute or submission. They just stopped us." "Perhaps that's worse." "What do you mean?" "If they had conquered us, we would be their enemies. We would have purpose. We would have someone to blame for our fall." The advisor shook his head. "But they've done something far more devastating. They've made us irrelevant. They've shown the galaxy that we're not worth conquering. We're just worth ignoring." The Emperor stared at him for a long moment. Then he turned back to the window and watched his empire burn. The humans had won without fighting, without conquering, without hate. And that perhaps was the victory of all. The galaxy watched as the empire fell apart. It didn't happen all at once. Empires that large don't collapse overnight, but the process had begun, and everyone knew it couldn't be stopped. Emperor IX made one final broadcast. He appeared on screens across the galaxy, looking older and more desperate than anyone had ever seen him. He called the human ship a weapon of mass destruction. He claimed that humanity planned to enslave every species under their technological superiority. He begged the galactic conquered to unite against this common threat before it was too late. "The humans have shown their true nature," he declared. "They have attacked our fleet without provocation. They have destabilized our government with propaganda and lies. They seek to destroy our way of life." The speech might have worked once, before the evidence, before Captain's broadcast, before 200 warships were disabled without a single death. Now it just sounded like the desperate words of a man, watching everything he built turn to dust. One by one, the species of the galaxy responded. They were first. Their representatives transmitted a message not to the Empire but to the quiet resolve itself. It was simple and direct. "We offer sanctuary. We offer friendship. We remember what you tried to give us 40 years ago." The consortium followed. Their message was more careful, more political, but the meaning was clear. They released all records of their dealings with the Empire, financial transactions, intelligence sharing, the bribes they had paid and received. They offered the information freely, they said, in the spirit of the transparency that humanity had demonstrated. They declared full independence from imperial rule. So did the. Within 72 hours, 8 species that had lived under control announced that they no longer recognized imperial authority. The Galactic Conquered held an emergency session. The debates were fierce and loud, but the outcome was never really in doubt. By a vote of 37-3, the Conquered formally condemned the Empire for the massacre at Nexus Station. They called on Emperor IX to surrender himself for trial. It was the first time in galactic history that the Conquered had taken action against one of its founding members. On Prime, the Emperor's own guard turned against him. They arrested him quietly, without ceremony, and confined him to his chambers. The commanders who had followed his orders for decades now looked at him with something worse than hatred. They looked at him with disappointment. Aboard the Quiet Resolve, Captain received message after message from species across the galaxy. Some offered thanks. Some offered apologies. Some simply asked questions about the energy synthesis technology she had promised to share. She responded to each one personally. "The technology will be transmitted within the hour," she told the representative. "Everything you need to build your own systems. We ask nothing in return except that you use it to help your people." "Why?" the representative asked. "After everything that was done to your people, after what we allowed to happen, why would you give us anything?" Was quiet for a moment. On her desk, her daughter's photograph caught the light. "Because my daughter believed that this was the right thing to do," she said finally. "She believed that the galaxy could change. She died believing that. I wasn't sure she was right. For 40 years, I wasn't sure." She looked at the messages filling her screen. Requests for cooperation, offers of friendship, species that had been enemies for generations now reaching out to each other because humanity had shown them something they had forgotten was possible. Now I think maybe she was. The Quiet Resolve began transmitting the energy synthesis data, every frequency, every relay, free to anyone who wanted it. The gift that humanity had tried to give 40 years ago finally delivered. Admiral watched the transmission from his disabled flagship. His crew was working to restore basic systems, but weapons and engines would take days to repair. Not that it mattered anymore. The war was over before it had truly begun. "Admiral," his communications officer said quietly, "the human ship is moving." Or looked at his tactical display. The Quiet Resolve was turning away from Prime. Slowly, gracefully, like a dancer taking a bow after a performance. Where are they going? They're heading for the border. They're leaving. Of course they were. The humans had done what they came to do. They had revealed the truth. They had given their gift. They had shown the galaxy what they could do and what they chose not to do. Now they were going home. Or stood and walked to the observation window. The human ship was already growing smaller in the distance, accelerating toward the hyperspace boundary. "Admiral," his second-in-command asked, "should we pursue?" "With what?" "They disabled our weapons." "When we make repairs?" "No," or shook his head slowly. "Let them go. We've done enough damage. It's time to start thinking about what comes next." Captain made one final transmission as the Quiet Resolve reached the edge of Imperial space. It was broadcast to every species, every world, every being with access to a communication system. "Humanity is not interested in ruling," she said. "We're not interested in revenge. We came to ensure that the truth was known and to give you what we tried to give you 40 years ago. What you do with these gifts is up to you." She paused. "My daughter Maya believed that the universe could be better. She believed that if we just showed people another way, they would choose it. She was killed for that belief, but she wasn't wrong." The stars stretched out behind her, vast and ancient and full of possibility. "The galaxy is yours. Build something worth believing in." The transmission ended. The Quiet Resolve jumped to hyperspace and vanished. In the weeks and months that followed, the galaxy changed. Emperor IX was tried before the Galactic conquered. The evidence against him was overwhelming. He was sentenced to spend the rest of his life on a prison world, alone with the ruins of everything he had built. The Empire became the Republic. It was smaller now, stripped of its conquered territories, but some said it was stronger for being honest about what it was. The energy synthesis technology spread across the galaxy. Worlds that had struggled with poverty and scarcity suddenly had abundant power. Species that had fought wars over resources found that there was enough for everyone. It didn't solve every problem. It didn't end every conflict, but it gave people something they had been missing. Hope. And on Earth, in a small garden behind a simple house, an old woman sat beneath a cherry tree and read the messages that came from across the stars. "Thank you," they said. "Thank you for not giving up on us." Looked at her daughter's photograph one last time. Maya smiled back at her, forever young, forever hopeful. "You were right," whispered. "You were right all along." The Galactic Concord's historian would later write about the event that changed everything. He would analyze the technology and the politics and the military implications. He would interview survivors and witnesses and experts. But in the end, he found that the most important truth was also the simplest. The humans held the power to burn the Empire to ashes, he wrote. They had every reason to choose revenge. Instead, they lit a candle and left it for others to carry. And slowly, one by one, the galaxy began to see by its light. The humans had returned. And this time, the galaxy was ready to listen.